In this video, we are going to explain what a blockchain is in very basic terms. By the end of the video, you'll be able to explain this life-changing technology to those you love, saving them from the authoritative dictatorships that never cease to control your every move. Nevertheless, we don't really discuss politics on this channel, mostly just ideas, so let's get into it. What is a block? In terms of cryptocurrency, a block is just a bunch of data. In fact, the data could be almost anything, but usually it's just a collection of records. For the numero uno crypto, Bitcoin, this data is literally just a list of transactions. For example, it might look like this. X pays Y $50, A pays B $80, and Y pays H $15. If we're dealing with Ethereum, it's usually just transactions, but it can be a few other things, like things called smart contracts, which are really neat, but we'll have time to explain them in another video. For other altcoins, they could be the usage of your Wi-Fi, or files, or documents. Nonetheless, a block is just a collection of records. For this example, to explain what a blockchain is, I'm going to stick with a record of transactions, like in Bitcoin. Specifically, we call this record a ledger because it is a record of value exchanging hands. Now, one thing you need to know is that blocks do have limits, and they can only have so many transactions in them, so we have to keep adding more blocks. For our example, Bitcoin has an average of around 1,500 transactions in one block right now. Now, this number changes, but you don't really need to know why. Just know that these blocks do fill up, and then we have to do something with them. Well, what do we do when these blocks are full? We add them to the network. Now you might be asking, how do we do that? Well, we do something called mine them. And since Bitcoin is a proof of work model, we have to prove that we mined them. This brings us to something called a hash. So the next big question is, what is a hashing function? A hashing function is a system where you can put something into it and it'll output a hash. Now there's a ton of math happening inside this magical black box, but essentially you give it something and it gives you something. In this case, Bitcoin uses the SHA-256 hashing function. SHA stands for Secure Hashing Algorithm, and 256 refers to the amount of zeros and ones that it has in whatever it puts out. So whether you put in your name or the entire dictionary, it'll always output 256 zeros and ones. Now, our computers are smart, so they convert these 0 to 1s to letters and numbers, and it is a complicated process and could be a video on its own, but essentially, with hashing functions, you need to know three main things. Number one, you can't find the input of a hash, you have to guess and check. So if you give it A, it will give you D. Then if you give it AA, it'll give you J. And then if you give it AAA, it'll give you U. Imagine if you wanted to find out what gave you an F. You'd have to just keep adding more A's until you found it. The second thing you need to know about hashing functions is that changing the input just a tiny bit changes the output a lot. So basically, if you do SHA-256 of this subscribe to our channel, you get this as the output. However, if you do please subscribe to our channel, you get this. See, these are completely different, even though we added one word. And lastly, the third thing you need to know is that calculating the hash takes some time. Now, it might only take a few milliseconds for one tiny string of text, but if you have an entire book that you're doing, or if you want to check a few million variations of it, it starts to rack up time and computing power. And so what Bitcoin is doing whenever you mine it is we're trying to add random numbers to whatever the block is so that we get a special ending. For example, let's say we're